Welcome to Greek for a Week. We are looking at another couple of verses here in First Thessalonians chapter 3, specifically verses 2 and 3. And we're still considering the paragraph chapter 3, verses 1 through 5. If you recall, last week we looked at how this paragraph began in verse 1, where Paul writes, Therefore, when we could no longer endure, or you could say, because we could not hold out any longer, we were willing to be left behind at Athens alone. And so we pick up verse 2 here. So, Paul, again, he's being left in Athens, and we sent Timothy, our brother and fellow worker of God in the gospel of Christ in order to strengthen you and to encourage concerning your faith, so that no one would be disturbed by these afflictions. For you yourselves know that we have been appointed for this. So as you think through, Paul basically is providing another way for him to be present with the church at Thessalonica. Obviously, that is his brother and fellow worker of God, Timothy. So let's look through. Our first verb here is epemsamen, and that's a version, the aorist first person plural, aorist active indicative of pempo. So again, he sent Timothy. Then you have the ento euangelio. So you have this prepositional phrase here. You could say this in the sharing of the gospel. And then the gospel, if you will, this is being further described as the gospel of Christ. So this genitive here comes back and restricts the dative word that precedes it, and that would be of Christ. Then you'll notice you have two purpose infinitives. You have the eis ta plus this infinitive here, and then the kai would also join this infinitive as purpose. So both of those, the first infinitive here, that is an aorist active infinitive of sterizo, and that's where he says that he sent Timothy for the purpose of strengthening you. And then the parakaleo here is also an aorist infinitive, parakalesai, again, an aorist active infinitive. Both of these would be considered purpose infinitives here. And what's interesting here is these two purpose infinitives will give way to another infinitive in verse 3 that I would indicate is a infinitive of result, and that is a present passive infinitive of sino. So this would be an infinitive of result. Paul sends Timothy here to strengthen, to encourage, for the result that you would not be disturbed by these afflictions. And what's interesting is the result infinitive is present. In other words, it's an ongoing result of not being disturbed because of Timothy's presence. And then when it says entes philipsen tautes, this right here, this prepositional phrase, I would say probably a dative of means, that you would not be disturbed by the means of. Again, these afflictions here. And then you have Agar further explaining why, or you could say further explaining that you yourselves, you know that you were appointed for this. So the appointed here, okay, that is a first person plural present passive indicative of kaima. And then the ace to ta would be goal or maybe even purpose here. So you yourselves, you know that you've been appointed for the goal of or for the purpose of this. In other words, I think Paul's trying to share here that the Thessalonians have been appointed or have been given afflictions or the means of the afflictions as they endure the persecution and the difficulty there in Thessalonica. So Timothy has a pretty incredible role here of being sent by Paul for the purpose of strengthening and encouraging, so that the result of those two things would be that they would not be moved or they would not be disturbed by the afflictions that are coming their direction. So that's verses 2 and 3. We will look at verses 4 and 5 next week and wrap up this paragraph. Have a great week.